When you see an Oasis Class ship, it's actually hard to fathom the size of them. And now they've been somewhat normalized. We've been seeing them since 2009, which is for over 15 years. And there are even more of them to come. Now, I don't know about you, but I always thought that Oasis and Allure of the Seas were going to be it, that they'd be restricted in terms of the ports that they could actually visit. And then something incredible happened. Ports dredged in order to accommodate them, and more ports became available to the Oasis Class. And that trend continued, because ships got bigger and bigger, and in many ways, the Oasis Class paved the way for that trend. With all of that being said, and having sailed on over 40 cruises and worked on cruise ships for almost a decade, I've never actually sailed on an Oasis Class ship. Until now. I'm sailing on one of the newest Oasis Class ships. Welcome aboard, Wonder of the Seas. Wonder of the Seas is really the Oasis Class refined. Not that it needed very much of a refinement. Now, originally, Wonder was built for the Chinese market, but then was adapted to fit a US clientele due to the effects of COVID and fleet redeployments. In early 2023, I was preparing to enter Royal Caribbean as a cruise director for what would be the final time. More on that later on. As I was preparing to join the company, they were nice enough to send me on a cruise aboard Wonder of the Seas to see their newest products at the time. We were in port with a number of other ships, but closest to us was the MSC Meraviglia. Now, I've got minimal experience with MSC. The last time that I sailed with them was back in 2010 on the MSC Musica. Should I sail on MSC sometime? Comment below and let me know what you'd like to see. Now, embarkation was a little bit rough. This was the pier around 1:30 p.m., and it did take a while to get on board. Now, I was actually sailing with a friend of mine, and it turns out the cabin that I'd be staying in would be way different than what we had originally thought. And as soon as I got on board, I was amazed. Check out the Royal Promenade.
Finally on board Wonder of the Seas, and look, the balloon drop is ready.
Welcome here to my cabin on board Wonder of the Seas. I'm so excited for this 7-day cruise. We're going to Coco Cay, we're going to St. Thomas and St. Marteen aboard the world's biggest cruise ship and of course Royal Caribbean's newest. I'm really excited to take a look at what the ship has to offer, but so far everything looks amazing. The ship is immaculate, and of course my cabin here is absolutely stunning. The story behind this cabin is that the lovely hotel director put me in the type of cabin that the cruise director would usually stay in, a 1-bedroom senior officer suite with a sitting area, Bose soundbar, bedroom, and a generously sized bathroom. And of course, off I went to explore the ship. My first stop was Central Park, which is my favorite place on board. Then it was off to the boardwalk. Now this place is amazing. They had this place called the Doghouse, and of course I had this fantastic hot dog. I'm gonna lie, I actually had 3 of these hot dogs. Then I headed upstairs to check out the view, but I got a little bit distracted by this stunning scale model of Wonder of the Seas, and it gives you a fantastic perspective of her size. I love exploring the ship on turnaround day, so I got a glimpse of the ultimate abyss and the new Windjammer design, plus part of the overhang outside of the solarium, which is a major difference between Wonder of the Seas from her other sisters. What I mean by saying that is that the actual layout of the solarium is very different on Wonder of the Seas and what will be Utopia of the Seas. If you take a look here, this is Oasis of the Seas, and the solarium is not fully enclosed, versus on Wonder of the Seas, it's fully enclosed and spans multiple decks. Then I headed down to another neighborhood on the ship, the entertainment place. This is where you were going to check out some of the comedy shows, the attic, and of course, gateway to the casino. Soon enough, it was time for Wonder of the Seas to cast off and of course, sail away from Port Canaveral. Now, despite all the bells and whistles of this ship, it very much still is a ship. And I love this element of cruising, of getting to still connect with departing and of course, sailing past all the other cruise ships that are in port. I did want to go to the main dining room for dinner this evening, but timing wasn't going to work out, so I made myself this lovely salad and of course had some dessert in the brand new Windjammer. Now you see, usually the Windjammer would actually be part of the Viking crown, but on Wonder of the Seas, that is where the sweets are. So I headed to the Bionic bar, got myself a drink, which ended up just being vodka in a cup, went to the attic, checked out the comedy show, and then made my way over to what is the Aqua Theater. The Aqua Theater is an incredible venue, and if you've seen any Oasis Class ship, it's hard to miss it. This show is called Intense, and interestingly enough, it's an all-female cast. It was a beautiful show featuring high dives, and honestly, if you go on any Oasis Class ship, do not miss the Aqua Show. It truly is remarkable. From there, I made my way over to the Royal Promenade for the balloon drop. Now, this has become somewhat of a staple on Royal Caribbean ships. Personally, I think it's incredibly cheesy. You have this billion-dollar ship with all of these bells and whistles, and then you want to do a balloon drop. But anyway, it was fun nonetheless, and a great way to end off my very first day. But I couldn't wait for our first day at sea. My day started a little bit later than I would have liked, but we made it in time for the beginning of lunch in the ship's main dining room, which is the exact same layout as the rest of the Oasis Class, just with a more modern aesthetic. The options here were pretty standard for what you'd expect on a cruise ship for lunch. I started off with some smoked salmon, which was as good as it could be, and my friend got the steak frites. These were prepared really well, but again, fairly average for the most part. My main course was the cod, which was actually above average, I would say. The dessert course was actually so highly anticipated for us that I forgot to pause and film it before we started eating. Anyway, as we exited the dining room, I walked around a little bit, waited for things to settle, and then strapped on my running shoes for a fantastic run around the ship. Now, the Oasis Class has an enclosed running track, and this is great because it means the sun is not beating down on you as it usually would be from the top deck. I love the motivation to keep going, and also, this is the best place to go ahead and relax. So, I enjoyed all that Wonder of the Seas had to offer under the Caribbean sun and took in her vast size, which, by the way, I was still getting used to. Now, before I knew it, it was already time for the evening. Time was flying by here, mostly because I noticed that there's so much stimulation on Oasis Class ships. Not that I mind it, but it's very different from a traditional cruise. Speaking of tradition, the production show that was on for this evening was definitely not traditional. It was called Voices, and it was actually done entirely a cappella, both with the cast on board in addition to pre-recorded voices that displayed on the screen. I thought it was really fun and unique, but a little bit cheesy, which is in complete contrast to the other production show which they have on board, called the Effectors 2. That's coming up in a little bit. Dinner was pretty straightforward at the Windjammer, and then I headed over to the Bionic bar. Now, drinks here actually end up being slightly less expensive depending on how you configure them. For the rest of the night, we ended off at the Cask and Clapper, the onboard pub, listening to the musician who was fantastic. But on the following day, I'd check out more of the dining venues on board and get ready for our very first port of call. One thing I really enjoy about Wonder of the Seas is all the little improvements they made to parts of the ship. For example, this part along the running track that otherwise was actually just crew-only space is now utilized as a sitting area. You can see where it is relative to size on Oasis of the Seas. I love the motivational sayings all around the running track. They're so much fun. This is the exterior of the Cask and Clipper. Each Royal Caribbean ship has its own British pub, which is cool because it's themed all across the fleet. Now, for lunch, I went to the main dining room and the starter was just not memorable. The salmon here was fantastic and I thoroughly enjoyed this cake. Overall, I would say lunch was mediocre, but I'm a big salmon fan, so that saved the day. I went back to relaxing on deck, and one thing you might notice is that obviously Wonder of the Seas has so many bells and whistles, and that's amazing. I'm not necessarily drawn to each and every one, so I'm sure if you sail on this ship, you would experience things very differently. So comment below and tell me what you would do on an Oasis Class ship. But for now, I was just trying to behave because I was about to work with the line, so there's only so much that I could go ahead and do. Before I knew it, day had already turned into night, so I made my way down to the boardwalk, which I love checking out in the evening. My first stop was dinner at Playmakers. Now, this is the ship's casual sports bar. You can have all sorts of standard pub fare in addition to a beer flight, which I really enjoyed. I had this burger, which on a scale of 1 to 10 was a solid 6, but I thoroughly enjoyed nonetheless. The ambiance at Playmakers is actually really nice, and not every single ship has it, including Allure of the Seas, which is still due to get renovated and of course receive it. Now, in terms of the actual experience, I enjoyed it, but it is a la carte, so there's not necessarily a fixed fee. The food here is mediocre at best, but again, you're paying for the atmosphere and also the novelty of having a beer flight. Interestingly, there was actually no entertainment in the theater or the aqua theater on this particular evening. There was an ice show, however, which I was going to be checking out later on in the cruise, but we were about to arrive in our very first port of call. Vessi is this video's channel partner. I love my Vessis. I've actually had them for years, and they are the ultimate travel shoe. They're waterproof, durable, stylish, light, and Canadian. The ultimate travel shoe. My favorites are the men's Cityscape Classic and the Weekend Chelsea. You can get yours by clicking on my affiliate link below, plus you'll be supporting the channel.
Docked here in St. Martin with two really cool cruise ships, and the first of which is Voyager of the Seas. Used to be known as Project Eagle back in 1998 when it was being developed, and then launched just before 2000, and it is beautiful. This is the ship that started the mega ship revolution. So really cool to have it here, and of course, see how beautiful it is.
When I was a kid, I remember watching documentaries about Voyager of the Seas and then pulling up next to a Voyager class ship in port. It was just incredibly big. And now to think Wonder of the Seas is docked next to Voyager of the Seas and it makes that ship look small. That, to me, is alarming. Plus, we were docked with Celebrity Beyond, which is one of the most stunning ships at sea. Comment down below and tell me if you agree. Having been to this port a number of times, I can suggest heading to a beach, which is right there in the main area, even a lovely little spot called Holland House, which is always a vibe. Now, I headed back on board pretty quick and went straight to the hot tub, since I knew it wouldn't be busy on a port day, with the same being said for the solarium. I guess since I was up there, I was a little bit inspired because I opted to dine at the Solarium Bistro, which is, by the way, included in your cruise fare. By this point, Celebrity Beyond had set sail as well, and we were actually going to be seeing them the following day in Charlotte Amalie. I really love my meal here. This was my kind of food. I started off with this delicious salad and then headed over to a shrimp cocktail. Overall, the dessert here was fantastic as well, and I highly recommend this place because it's obviously included and it's really light. The show in the theater that night was called Tap Factory, and it features a contortionist, aerialist, and a tap dancer, and to be honest, I didn't have high expectations for this. It actually turned out to be a lot more fun than I thought it would, and it really wasn't that cheesy. So, highly recommended if you go on board, make sure not to miss this really fun show. I caught a little bit of the friendly feud, but headed to sleep a little bit early because I was about to meet an old friend. Today was a really special day because I got to experience a lovely blast from the past. When I first started working on ships in 2015, I started off at Celebrity Cruises, and one of my very first activities managers was this guy on the right, Luigi. And now he is cruise director on board Celebrity Beyond and is very much their main cruise director. He's such a nice guy, it was great to see him and catch up. Soon enough, I was on board, grabbed my Frappuccino, and had a quick little photo shoot because I was actually going to be taking my cruise director headshots, which would then be sent to head office. I enjoyed a fantastic dinner in the main dining room, but I tried something different. I actually went ahead and tried the escargot, so here's a little bit about how that went.
Okay, it's the first time I'm ever trying escargot. Thank you guys, have a nice evening. No, that's not a thing that I enjoy.
Well, at least I gave it a shot. In the end, I went back to my default, which of course is salmon. I also ordered a separate main just to make up for the loss of the appetizer, which was a little bit of butter chicken. Plus, I had this fantastic pastry for dessert, and then this cake with ice cream. Now, I have to tell you, as much as it pains me to say it, Carnival's molten chocolate cake is bar none the best. Now, let's talk about the 70s party. This was going on the Royal Promenade. I decided to skip it simply because there would be many 70s parties in my future. We headed up to the music hall for our final stop of the night. This is a live music venue that originally came from the Quantum class and wasn't actually in the Oasis class, but it was great to see. After that, I took a little bit of a walk through Central Park before what would be our final sea day on board Wonder of the Seas. But I'd be checking out one of the coolest production shows I've ever seen, on top of some great dining venues. The following day started off a little bit gray and with some rain, but I got to check out some features that I've been really looking forward to seeing, including the Rising Tide Bar that goes from the Royal Promenade all the way up to Central Park. That was definitely in my future. I headed over to Cafe Promenade and grabbed my morning coffee as well. We'll talk more about Cafe Promenade coming up later on, but basically they have these great little snacks that you can grab and go with as well. With my coffee, I took a quick walk around Central Park, and I really appreciate the details that Royal Caribbean puts into their ships, including this lovely map that shows you around, and how many walkways there are that are actually sprinkled around this incredible venue. After that coffee, I had the right type of fuel to head over to the Vitality at Sea Fitness Center, which is located at the front of the ship. It was beautiful to walk into, especially because you have those porthole style windows, and it is right above the jogging track. Let's talk about one criticism of the Oasis class though. If you take a look at any major ship, you'll notice that there are a lot of bars and lounges that would border the exterior parts of the ship. In this case, the Oasis class looks very much into itself, so views of the ocean are actually rare, unless you're up on the higher decks, but most lounges don't actually have an exterior view. I hope you're enjoying the video so far, but a question for you. Have you ever heard of the Captain's Collection? Well, you have now, because I've designed some exclusive merch only available at travelwithkabir.ca, all the way from sweaters and hoodies to long sleeve tees and hats, each featuring a captain's epaulette, so you can feel like the captain that you are. Plus, you can take 10% off by using the coupon code KEEPINGAFLOAT, which is also the name of my podcast, which you can check out anywhere that you listen to your podcasts. All of your purchases support the channel, which of course is greatly appreciated. Alrighty. Let's get back to it. I already had my Starbucks Frappuccino in hand. I was just missing creature comforts. Then I headed over to the Park Cafe. This is a cafe nestled right inside of Central Park, and it's a great alternative to the Windjammer. They've got fantastic grab and go options, as well as the option to actually prepare your own salad, which by the way is great if you're very health conscious. Once you come in from the Park Cafe, there's this hilarious painting that's in one of the bathrooms. I found it very entertaining. We're moving straight on into what is now our formal lunch on board. And I had this great caprese salad. I had some fruit as well. Overall, a very basic meal. That was also combined with a couple of sandwiches from the Park Cafe and maybe a glass of wine. There was a matinee performance of the Effectors 2. So this is a continuation of another show that they have along in the Quantum class, and I've never seen any show like this, from costume design to special effects. The only price that comes with is that the special effects may not work, and that led to a show stop of about 20 minutes during our show. However, it meant that some people left, and I upgraded my seat, so I headed on down and sat right in front of the stage. The performers here are so incredibly talented, and it was incredible to get right up close and personal with many of these performers as they do come through the audience, and frankly, they can be a little bit startling. Some of the show was just ridiculous, but I actually really enjoyed it. It was something completely different that I've never seen before. The special effects here truly are remarkable, especially when some of the characters would fly through the audience and then they would use lasers to facilitate further motion. They also put a bunch of drones in the theater as well, which is very difficult in a ship that's moving, and they were just so exactly and precisely timed throughout the show. On top of that, they even put a spaceship up above the audience. Ice shows are something that have been around for quite a long time with Royal, debuting on Voyager of the Seas, as I mentioned earlier on in the video. And this show is an evolution of that. It's called Seasons, and it's meant to take you through all 4 seasons. In fact, it even snows during the show. I mean, of course it's fake, but they did ride these bikes around on the ice. Fun fact, they actually have these little screws sticking out of the tire to help get some grip on the ice. Of course, the performers were fantastic, and it was nice to see an ice show with modern music. After that, to finish off the night, I did something I've always wanted to do. Grab a drink at the Rising Tide Bar. I went ahead and did this with my friend Jessica, whom I was sailing with. Luckily, she actually had her own cabin next to mine, so this was one of the few times we got to spend together.
Well, good evening from Wonder of the Seas. It's Jess, and we are on the Rising Tide Bar, getting ready to go all the way from deck 5 up to deck 8. I know, woo! It's like a really slow elevator, but with alcohol.
Eventually, when the bartender returns.
He's preparing us for takeoff. So anyway, let's see how it goes.
It was totally a novelty and a lot of fun, but I went a bit early because it was our final day aboard Wonder of the Seas, and we were in perfect day at Coco Cay. Our day at Perfect Day at Coco Cay was pretty low-key. All we did was go for a walk and find a sun lounger, which actually wasn't a problem. But remember, there are a number of attractions here and the pricing does vary depending on how many people are on the island, especially when it comes to cabana reservations and the water park, so be sure to plan that in advance. Getting back on the ship, we got to check out Liberty of the Seas, whom we were docked with, and then see the Anchors Away parade. Now, this is a very similar parade to what is on Allure of the Seas, and fun fact about these parades, so many members of the entertainment department have to do this, despite many of them not wanting to. So I did see some frowny faces, but for the most part, it was a ton of fun. As I got ready for what would be my final dinner on board Wonder of the Seas, and a special one at that, I caught a little glimpse of Oasis of the Seas sailing alongside us. The restaurant of choice for tonight was a specialty dining restaurant called Wonderland, based on Alice in Wonderland. Now, they got really creative with the food here, right down from painting the menus to a martini that melts pretty much from cotton candy, on top of some really cool culinary adventures, things that you wouldn't necessarily think of. Now, some things were a little bit basic, like for example mozzarella sticks, but then we have this incredible hard-boiled egg, which I think was really special. It looks like it was in a nest. On top of that, we had some of these sushi rolls as well, which were really creative. And to be 100% fair, a lot of the stuff here was so imaginative that I actually can't remember what it was actually called. The dessert, though, was my favorite. I loved seeing all of that chocolate melt, and it was fantastic. Mind you, this specialty dining experience was quite a bit, setting each my friend and I back over about $80 US. From there, we went ahead and went for a little bit of a walk. Whenever I have the final night on a ship, I like to go ahead and say goodbye to the rest of the ship, as cheesy as that sounds. But here are some of my final thoughts about Wonder of the Seas and the Oasis Class experience. This Oasis Class ship is very much the Oasis Class refined. It's pretty and very much the modern royal aesthetic, and it really does complement the design of the ship. The next thing is that the ship is organized, and that is because Royal Caribbean has so much experience with this class of ship, and there are even more ships on order. This ship is also geared very much toward families, especially at this time of year. We had tons of kids on our sailing, and this actually is indicative of the Oasis class. This also has to do again with the time of year, and this was over spring break, so that definitely is a factor. Another unfortunate reality is the upsell, and this is part of the Royal Caribbean product now, which really wasn't quite as heavily up until recently, so be prepared to try and be upsold at every turn. The next and final thought I have is that the Oasis class is extremely inward focused, so you're kind of ocean adjacent, which isn't always a bad thing, but it's definitely a different type of cruise than sailing on a more traditional ship, for example Royal Caribbean's Freedom or Voyager class of ships.
Overall, I can't wait to head out on another Oasis class ship again very soon. Now, as I mentioned, I no longer work on cruise ships and don't ever plan to again. More on that story coming up. But that means that you have an unfiltered, unbiased, and somewhat insider's perspective from me. So be sure to stay tuned for even more cruise content. And hey, why not subscribe to me on Instagram and TikTok? Until next time, thanks so much for sailing with me, and I'll see you on board again soon.